Shall we begin, Darren?
Yeah, yes, you may.
Okay. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to GDI's seminar series number 9 on people's movements for change for a better world. Today, we are privileged to have with us Dato Seri Dr. Anwar Fazal, who will provide valuable insights into how simple but effective citizens' actions changes in society that were revolutionary in changing the course of history. He will address today, how do we close ranks and build true solidarity? How do we creatively construct alternative, life-giving and people-centered narratives to replace oppressive and divisive regimes? What are the essential elements of movement building and leadership? How do we maintain momentum? What structures work best? Anwar Fazal is a catalyst, multiplier, and accelerator of ideas and social movements, with a passion for pioneering local and global citizens' actions networks on public interest issues affecting peace, peace with oneself, peace with others, and peace with the environment. He is founder and key player in over a dozen local and global citizen networks, including the Consumers Association of Penang, Transparency International Malaysia, International Baby Food Action Network, Pesticide Action Network, Health Action International, and the World Alliance for Breastfeeding Action. He was president of several worldwide organizations, including the International Organization of Consumers Union and the Environment Liaison Center International in Kenya. He initiated the idea of several popular mobilization days like World Consumer Rights Day on March 15, World Breastfeeding Week from 1st to 7th of August, and World Migrants Day on 18th of December. For his work, Anwar has received the Right Livelihood Award, which is commonly known as the Alternative Nobel Prize, the United Nations Environment Programme Global 500 Honor, Mother Earth Hall of Fame, the Malaysian government's Langkawi Environmental Award, the Malaysian government's National Consumer Advocate Award, and the Gandhi King Akeda Community Builders Peace Award. So I'm so honored to introduce to you my longtime mentor and good friend. I'm so honored that he's here today to talk to us, especially us being a new movement in Malaysia. I'm Claire Westwood. I'm with GDI's committee, and I'm passing this over now to our honored speaker for the day. Thank you to all of you who are coming today. Over to you, Anwar. Anwar, you're on? Yeah.
Yes, on. You have that, yeah. Well, wonderful to join this community that the slide keeps on coming, and I would like to see also, yeah, leave the logo on at least, not the announcement of the person who's speaking. I'm really wonderful to be in a group of people who want to make a world a better place. And I wanted to start off by just showing you a logo of a fundamental thing that has inspired me to do many of the things that I have done. And this is a logo that the Right Livelihood movement used for many years. And because the word right livelihood itself, which comes from an Asian tradition and the equivalents of it in many different traditions, it is how to live your life rightly, living it in a way in which it makes a better world, a better community, yeah? And those kinds of issues. And that concept of right livelihood gives you a kind of broad picture of what it means. And when they were looking for symbols of where one should start off and what one should remember, one of them was a symbol of yin and yang. Yeah? And many of you know that symbol of a circle with an S in the center. And you know it as a symbol of very often people say men and women and so on, and different things. Actually, it's very interesting. It's much more than that. First of all, it's a scientific symbol. Yeah, because very often people don't know, they think of a design is just a design, but actually it's a very scientific principle. And it's the shape of the S is the shadow that is made by a pole over a year as the sun shines on Mother Earth, and in one place, yeah, and the Earth is turning, the sun is moving, yeah, and this is the shadow that is made, the S. So it's a very powerful symbol, and it represents how the heavens and the earth are connected, and that they have an intrinsic connection. And when people wanted a symbol, they to see the relationship between the heavens and the earth, they saw this interaction, this symbol, as an indication of that, and so it became then the kind of synchronicity, yeah, of many things in life, that in order for us to exist, there has to be that kind of synchronism that is important, and which means that we connect with others, we listen to others, we work together with others. So it became a lesson in what you call balance and harmony. Yeah, balance and harmony between all kinds of things, and so this symbol is a very powerful symbol. In it, the group decided that what are we doing, as citizens movements, because this is a college that we started where every single person who'd been awarded the Alternative Nobel Prize becomes a fellow, and they have been very strong change makers, showing courage, showing ability to change. Yeah. What were they doing also? What would be a powerful symbol? So we decided on the lotus as the symbol, and the lotus is such a beautiful flower that appears in the most dirtiest of waters that you can imagine, and yet it emerges out with its purity and beauty. And the idea was that for those of us who are working to make a better world, we live very often in a rotten world. We live in a place where there's bigotry, there's racism, there's destruction, careless, wasteful consumption, where we are destroying our rivers, our earth, our skies, and destroying the air, and all that murky environment in which we have created ourselves, out of which, how do we move out? Yeah, move out. And the idea of a symbol that it is possible that you can be one of those beautiful flowers that come out, yeah, and you can show your purity and your beauty, and that gives people hope for wanting to make a change in that. So I just wanted to share that as a beginning to show how one global movement that for example, this college that was set up was done by getting a powerful group of people, all of whom had won an award, and different kinds of groups in different parts of the world have a certain community, and you too are a community. You too are a community that has a very special interest in, for example, in climate. But when you're interested in the climate, you also have to be interested in quite a lot of things, and that would be networks of other networks who are also involved in things that have a relationship to this. So the people who are interested in climate, there will be the consumer movement. There would be very general, sometimes environmental movement. There would be people who are dealing with only the forest. There will be the forest network. There might be the fish action preservation. There might be somebody who's only interested in tigers. Yeah. So you can see the great diversity of different kinds of people running different kinds of organizations of all kinds of sizes and shapes and and framework, who all contribute to whatever you are doing. So one of the great things is for you, as I said in my introduction, is to understand the whole universe, the galaxy of the fact there are so many people who are working together to make some change in some area of work. And if you have that kind of mapping, then you see yourself also somewhere in that galaxy. And when you see that galaxy, very often when you want to get things done, get things done, one of the wonderful opportunities very often is to link with other groups who can give you strength and give you even a larger space, because you then can do your work even with much more strength and with much more solidarity from other movements. And this makes networks of networks very often that have worked around all of the world. And there are all kinds of structures that we deal with in life, so, and many of these structures work in different kinds of ways. They work because of what the individuals who are behind it are. You may have a very authoritarian person who wants to run a movement, and it's all about that person. The movement even develops that kind of name. Sometimes it's not he who wants to do it, but the people need a name on which they can move on. So you get that kinds of organizations that are inspired very often by one person, one that can transform itself into a cult, maybe, or into different kinds of organizations, and people keep that name for that organization, and they move on. Other people become issue oriented, and they take, and that's what also your work is. They have an issue orientation, and the issue orientation is in the area of action for the climate. And then when you take that issue on climate, you must know, in fact, that in the galaxy, there are all kinds of stars, different kinds of people all over the world that are also working in this issue. And if you are going to make a difference, link with them, understand them, and make sure that you can benefit from all the wonderful things you can do. The worst thing that movements very often do is like what they tell the story of Sisyphus. It's a Greek story where you think you're doing great work and you move forward, up, and you take your stone up, but then you say, I think I've accomplished something. The stone falls down. Yeah, and so you lose it. So if there are people all over the world, and if you connect with them, if one branch falls off or something just flies off, you find the strength of the total movement is there. Yeah. So one of the really wonderful things is to have that universal connectivity with the people who are like-minded in your area, and other people who are having skills that might be useful for you. It's like I use the story of the 3 brick layers. Yeah? You find 3 people laying bricks. You ask the first person, what are you doing? Say, I'm laying bricks. You can see I'm laying bricks. Many people in the NGO movement are like that. They've got a little bit of job. They just do that particular job. If they are paid to do a job, then they just do what they are paid for. If they are volunteers, well, they say, I take charge of this area. This is mine. Very often they forget other things. You ask a second bricklayer, what am I doing? Say, I'm building a school. You see his mindset. I mean, he's a bricklayer, but he also sees the totality of what you are doing. And you ask a third bricklayer, what are you doing? He said, I am, because the second one said, I'm building a school. Yeah. The third one says, I am building a better future. I'm building a better future. So that person has got a vision in that. So in organizations, you will have to deal with all these 3 kinds of bricklayers. But you would need that. You would need people who've got the skills of really doing the work. You've got people who also understand what your bigger program is. And there will be those who can see in the very big picture of how all this is going to impact on humanity, on your conscience and your wanting to see happiness for lots of people. So that's a very, very significant sort of framework that that you can have a thought about. Yeah. So can we move from this logo to the next one? So next one, I share with you 5 images because one of the things that I find, we have 3 systems working in our brains. One is the auto brain. The auto brain is driven by hunger, fear, sex, auto thing. And there's a second brain system operating that is very emotional, that builds on, I love this, I like that, that looks wonderful, that, oh, so that's cool, And a third part of your brain, which is the thinking brain, where you use rationality and you work in different kinds of ways. In order to operate, there are certain kinds of frameworks that your brain must learn about, I put them into symbols because symbols have a way of retaining your own retaining them in your own mind, and then making yourself something that you want to see subsequently, in that. And I start usually with just the flower. And do look at the flower, and of course, a flower is a thing of real beauty and happiness and creativity and joy and so on. Those are the kinds of things that actually we want to see the world. And very often, if we look for an image of the world, just like it was the lotus that I showed you, a flower is a very, very powerful symbol. And I take here a flower with 5 petals. And to me, these 5 petals, they then can represent what I call the Panchasila. Panchasila is a Asian concept from the civilization of Southeast Asia, where half the world lives. In there, if you draw a kind of circle, that's Asia, China, Indonesia. This place is an enormous place that is there. And when you take this flower, what would be the Panchasila, the 5 things? One is, the first and most important one is social justice. A world in which we want to see social justice. The second is a world in which we want to see ecological circularity and sustainability. Ecological. It's a world, then the third petal is a place where we want to see participatory democracy, that people all over have a chance to engage, to learn, to feel that they are part of the community that's going to be changed. So any kind of good governance system will have to have that kind of participatory system operating. The fourth one is economic productivity. And people want to see, you want to make a better world, you must make sure that whatever you do is productive in the sense that it actually helps the process. Nowadays, you don't make productivity such that it is a waste, where you destroy the environment, you destroy people's life by making them eat too much food, for example, and all kinds of ways in which we can destroy ourselves. But you can do an economics, which is a caring economics, where actually your products that you do are all very, you can say, like the just and ecological, the 2 points that I mentioned of. Then it's real productivity. And the fifth one is something also that should never be forgotten, and that is cultural vibrancy. We all live in systems in which very often, we have different kinds of customs and cultures that celebrate different kinds of things, that eat different things. Our colors are different, our gender, our spiritualities have different kinds of bases that we have. Yeah, all those kinds of things. To view them as not divisiveness, I think Nelson Mandela once said, our world is not divided by race, color, gender, or religion. Our world is divided into wise people and fools. And I think I said that earlier. And fools divide themselves by race, color, gender, or religion. Yeah? And so cultural vibrancy, to understand that all of us that are part of like different kinds of flowers, different kinds of things are all contributing, and that gives you a kind of, you can say, a vision of what the world is like. The star, the star is what I put there for you. If you want to be a star, if you want to be somebody, and usually when we use the word star, someone who actually is there making right in front, and making a difference, what would be the kinds of things? And I talk about 5 C's. C. Yeah? The first one, your conscience, because if you have a conscience, you will care. You will think and say, how can I allow these kinds of things to go on? Yeah, I cannot accept it. If you have no conscience, then I'm afraid. I'm afraid you are, you can say, one of those persons that doesn't care for the world. I don't like to use other words, but that is an extremely important word. And the second word is compassion. And compassion is caring. You have a mind that knows what is right, what is wrong, what should be done, what should be done. But then you have a kind of compassion that is got empathy, that you actually care for both the tangibles and the intangibles in the world today. You care for the universe, you care for all those kinds of things. But conscience and compassion has to also have competence. That you have to learn how to develop the kind of skills that are needed if you want to make change. It's like the bricklayers. You have to know how to lay a brick. You have to learn how actually you can do things well. And how do you learn? Where are the kinds of different competencies? And everywhere people have done some of those things somewhere, you can start learning from them. Do your mapping about where people have done these things together. Then courage. You have to have that spirit of, I am prepared to do it. I'm prepared to do it. If you have that kind of courage, then you move on. And the fifth one is creativity. That your ability to see things and the ability to how to make them in a form in which they can make a difference. People enjoy taking part of it. You use images, you use art, you use songs. You use all the different, your clothes, and all the meanings that are part of our culture. How to think things out of the box of different kinds of ways. The creativity becomes very important, and it makes you a very different movement. In that, if you have got the kind of images that reflect your organization. Otherwise, you become just that, you can say it like authoritarian, single focused. But again, people don't see you as humanity. And if you want to be the star, then these are the 5 C's that I found extremely useful. The next image that I use is that of a wheel. Now, a wheel is a very powerful symbol. You can see, how a wheel means movement. The wheels have made us mobile. The bicycle, or the whole history of wheels, of spinning and everything else. And it's amazing amount of power in the wheel, of how turning it around, can make things move. We draw water from well up there, we use a wheel that can take up a bucket, and the bucket is taken up there. We have bicycles, we do all kinds of mobility items. You look at even our fan, which keeps our place cool. These are all wheels that that are magic. And I use the wheel as something that all of us must remember as a symbol of a certain power. And I call it the power of 5 because, again, you notice I'm using Panchasilas in all 3 of them, 5 elements. And this represents power, the power of movement, power of movement. And the first one is the power of 1. Everywhere in the world, if you look at history, it's amazing what a single person can do. A simple person can trigger off something. Yeah, simple person can build up other people who then take up what they have done. Yeah? You take this young lady Greta, who transformed the whole climate movement among children and became a world figure as a result of the little action that she took. So you take the great personalities of the world, people like Gandhi or Mandela. They were all people who had a certain philosophy, a certain path, and they took those paths up and they built. One of the very important persons, if you take an environmental movement, there are lots and lots of examples. If you look at just Google rightlivelihood.org, you'll find some 180 people who are all singles or who form small groups that actually can make transformational change. So the power of 1 is the second one is the power of many, where you form a network, you form a group, you form a community, and you can form different kinds of shapes of these communities that because the power of 1 can even become greater when it transforms to the power of many. Yeah, and when you have the power of money, many, then you have the kind of greater strength that can become move towards universality. The third is the power of information. Today we have a digital world. We have information, from all over the world that we can get. So access to information makes an organization strong. Yeah? Makes you know what is information, what is knowledge. Like information is just data. What is knowledge? That means what is that? What's the learning element of that particular information? And then it also transforms into wisdom. What is the past that really? And now that we know, we have all. What's the wise thing to do? Yeah, in them. So the power of information is now even more powerful with the digital. It also means that people who are working against you also can use these powers, of course. So you have to learn a great deal on how the new digital world can operate. The fourth is, I call that the halo approach. If you look at the world, in every movement that has developed, it ends up in making a certain change where the United Nations ends up adopting. Yeah, so you have an international convention, you have an international agreement, you have then also spiritual traditions where they tell you, for example, like my own tradition is Islam, the most important element with regard to the world is tread lightly on earth. And that means you must not eat up the earth as if it's all yours for you to kill and eat and suffer. No, tread lightly on earth. So in every spirituality, and there are very good books, and I have a whole set of them. It was done by the World Wildlife Fund. You can even, I think, download them. In every spirituality, what are the elements about the environment that those spiritualities tell you? And it's very, very powerful. So people who have a background and come from different spiritual related groups and so on can draw on this book. So it's ecology in Buddhism, ecology in Islam, ecology in Christianity, ecology and Judaism. Imagine one book on each one of Jainism in India, and amazing variety, yeah? And they were done by the World Wildlife Fund, which is of course also in Malaysia, and they realized how important spirituality, the halo, is also important if we want to care for the environment, because the environment is a gift to us from the Almighty, yeah, the gift to us, the universe, and for all our spiritualities, and we have to learn to live with it, and care for it as if it was like I use the word mother Earth, and I use like the universe in our home. So the UN regulations, when you want a government to change, what are the government's agreements, or what has the UN already agreed on? Take that as your framework, use that also as a framework to make a change. And when you use that kind of framework, they say, hey, what are you doing? What is all these stupid things? No, these are things to which we have signed up on. What are we doing about it now? Yeah, so you have the strength, and you care for that. The fifth part of the wheel is that there are lots of people who say, it's too difficult to do, you know, there are too many people in the world like that also. I always tell them, go and study the power of success. Look at the places all over the world where those who say it cannot be done, there are people who already have done it. But sadly, we live in a kind of world very often, successes don't make the news enough. It's the failures that make huge headlines and so on. So if you look around the world on every single issue, there are wonderful, wonderful success stories. And one book you have to read if you're interested in being part of the movement. If you want to be, the bricklayer that goes beyond to building a school and also to make a better world, that kind of bricklayer. It's a book called Blessed Unrest. And Blessed Unrest takes you through a journey of hundreds and hundreds of civil society groups working on all kinds of issues and how they made a difference. The subtitle of this book, I haven't got it exactly, but it's like people have made a lot of difference and we don't know about it. Yeah, that's why he uses this very powerful spiritual words, blessed unrest. Yeah, people who are unhappy, but they have done it and they have made a difference. And so amazing amount of sharing and the power of success to share, to every time that we have something that we have done well, celebrate it, share it, write it out in a form in which it can go to other places, share it with the community, and get other people also to have the culture of sharing success. So the power of success is very, very important in movements for making change. So that's the story of the wheel. Then I move to the triangle, the three. Now with the triangle itself, there are large numbers of things that we have to become aware of when we are social movements, so that you make your own space as to where you want to take your own action into. One, for example, we have to understand that we live in a world which local, in a globe. I'm talking only about the globe. The universe is even bigger. Yeah, of local, national, and global. These are three frameworks that are very important because they have legal structures. So you have your individual rights, then you have national governments, and then you have global organizations in there. So your own work has to understand these three elements very carefully. Yeah, and then when you do that, you know that there's some things that I can draw on from each one of them, and at the appropriate time from the one or the other. Yeah, and the second element also that I very often use, the triangle, that we should not forget, is to look also at what normally we call the three generations. You can say the youth, the middle age, and the older. Each one of them has got their own strengths, their own challenges, and their own lifestyles, and they work in different kinds of ways. When you are young, you are also very often extra courageous, or you have kind of energy and passion, and people who become student leaders and so on. Then there are those who then later move in. You get married, you got family, you got children. You transform yourself into different kind of thing. Then there are those in the older places who already have gone through those two phases, and who have very often, having had got that experience itself, can give you wisdom of the kind that they have gone through, and they are living in a new kind of environment where they have seen and gone through three generations already, yeah, for life. And so remembering that, and how did you reach to the young, how do you reach to the middle age, the middle group, and how do you also reach the elders, and different people can be very transformational because they've got their own networks, they've got their own different kinds of challenges that we need to worry about. The other thing about these three is also what I would call a simple way of remembering the three big challenges that we have to always deal with. Very often you say, now, hey, I've forgotten, what are they? I talked about justice, that equity is a word also that should be part of your vocabulary, because when you talk about vocabulary, of vocabulary like equity, you're talking about justice, you're talking about fairness to various people. And equity then becomes a very powerful word, and it gives you the kind of strength. You say that I'm working for equity, I'm working for justice. The second E is ecology. And ecology is, of course, the whole issue of mother. So that's another E, and I've spoken a little bit about all the different challenges that we have in the environment itself. And there are people who make beautiful movies. They're people who make beautiful poems, about the environment. There are people who make wonderful songs about the environment, and that's what I talk about, cultural vibrancy and so on. And different kinds uh, of groups of people, will talk about the environment and using all the different strengths that we have. And then ecology doesn't mean just, going up and uh, uh, trying to save the environment. How do you do so? How do you get people engaged? If you have a beautiful poem, hundreds of people get inspired, or a song, I think many of us will remember one of Michael Jackson's, great songs about how the environment was being destroyed, and it is so powerful the way he goes, to it, And then you have groups of other people like We Are the World, and they sing, and those things get millions and millions of people, and it builds up solidarity and empathy between people. And then the third E is called economics, because we know we live in a world where the three most important things become money, money, and money. Yeah? And very often those of us who are concerned with the three P's, as people, have to deal with how the economic system will operate. Now there is a lot of rethinking about people, about the way in which businesses operate. You have changes that are being done by those companies itself. They start off by something called CSR, corporate social responsibility, and they build something like that, which is charity. And then very often they say it's very wonderful. We do the charity, we get tax exempt. Yeah. So they don't pay taxes to the government, which means that the charity that they are giving you through their CSR, which is tax-free, is actually depriving the government of revenue, which they could use also for the public. So very often, depending on what kind of CSR is. So other corporations set up foundations in their name, and then through those foundations, they set up different kinds of programs. Where very often also the setting up of these foundations comes from their profits and so on, and if they come legitimately from profits on which also they have paid their taxes, or you can find people who make a lot of money in Malaysia, but they know how to launder the money. Yeah. So what happens? You set up a company. You make a lot of money from the forests in Malaysia. You set up a company in Hong Kong where the taxes are less made, and you have a system in which the payments are made, where the profits are all made in Hong Kong. That means you sell the logs cheaply to the company in Hong Kong, and that Hong Kong company, with which of course you have all your connections, sells them at the world market price, and all the profits are kept in Hong Kong. And then from Hong Kong, they can launder them also to Cayman Islands, or, for those of you who have read the Panama Papers, you know how there's a world of money laundering. They're called treasure islands, where you can park your money and avoid paying taxes. Some of it may be legitimate, because if you're an organization that's doing global work, you may want to find a place to park that money, because you park it back to Malaysia and then you want to transfer, there may be all kinds of formalities and so on. So some people use it with good, but many people use it just to hide things. So understanding the real economics of the world, the real capitalism, the real motives of corporations, of those that are sincere, those are that we call greenwashing, the place, those that genuinely transform themselves into a company that will want to do these kinds of things, and even get staff and look at all their products. So every product that they produce, it's just not about value for money, how much you make, but what's the value it gives to human beings, what's the value it gives to the earth and the environment. So there are lots of transformations going on, and you've got to understand the economics. And in economics, you have also different kinds of taxation systems. Now you have global taxation systems where they can have taxes on carbon, and money from that, it can be shared with other countries in the world. A whole new kind of money sharing globally. Some of it is very good. Some of it actually legitimizes the continuation sometimes of bad work, and they get away by saying, okay, we'll pay a cost. So they pay a price for doing something that they should be doing less of. So they say, okay, we are doing less, but we are giving some money for alternative work for that. And so there are lots of debates, and many of those things you have to begin to understand. There are places where the government's taxation system is very much focused on social welfare and making sure that the bottom, the people at the bottom rank have all kinds of services, that the whole social system is organized differently. So you have different kinds of democratic systems with different kinds of economic systems that are operating. You can have authoritative ones, and you have those with different kinds. And now you find people also with what they call the circular economy, that's becoming a very big, where people become part of a sharing system. There was even a very strong movement in Sweden, where you give something to somebody else. They don't have to pay you for it. They buy it from you. You get points, and the points are put in a certain system. And then you can use the points the next time you go to a shop and said, I've got 5 points from there. You are part of this member of this point system. I buy something with the points that I have kept in there. So you get out of the currency system, because as you know, currency systems also, if you understand them really, can be great manipulators of the world. Because you then become beholden to that piece of paper, and that piece of paper very often has no value as the one that was created by different kinds of systems that may have its own ways of operating that can also be careful. So sharing economies, all those kinds of things are emerging in different kinds of places. So if you are someone who are working in a movement, and you also want to be yourself an example of change, or yourself, I'm working climate, but I also want to see better things, and I want to understand better other social movements that are making change, then you become part of a global community that wants to make a better world. And people respect the work that you are doing because you are specialized in that area of work. At the same time, you draw on their work because the worst kinds of organizations are those that only care for their work, and they can't be bothered with the things that others, and they don't see the relationships and the connectivity that is extremely important.
Dato Anwar, you have 10 minutes more.
Yes, yes.
Just a time check. Yes,
10
thank
minutes
you.
is a long time. Yes.
Yes.
And the last symbol that I have that I am sharing with you is a Sufi symbol, and it's a Sufi symbol that reminds all of us about two things in life. One is the straight path, the path of conscience, of principles that are so important in life, of your honesty, your integrity, your responsibility, all those things that are very, very clear that you must be there if you are going to be someone who is humanitarian. The second is like the river, the flexible thing in life, the way you do things. There can be different ways. There are people who would like to debate, other people like to have a dialogue, other people who like to see documents, other people say, give me digital, don't send me the book, So you have the bookish people and you have the internet people. I mean, all kinds of worlds that you will live in. You have to learn about the flexibility, that there are all kinds of different things that you will do. And remember that your way maybe of doing those kinds of things is not necessarily the way. You will learn a lot from everybody else. So if you have that mindset of the core things that are important to you that are there, and understanding the whole mass of things that you have to learn flexibility. You have to learn, hey, thank you for sharing that with me. You have changed my mind. You have changed something in my life that I did not know about. Because you had that flexibility, you were open because it's a subject you did not know much about. But if you are someone who is ignorant, and then who makes that ignorance their big strength, then you go and preach around whatever you want to preach. You are not going to be doing any great service in terms of what really is needed. So that's the map that I wanted to share with you, which is arising out of my 60 years of activism, of creating social movements of all kinds of issues, whether it's breastfeeding or fighting for environment, and you name the issues. I'm very active in the interfaith movement. I'm very active in the peace movement, and there will be some things that I would share with you. But maybe we can take the picture out and let's look at each other and chat with each other. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Dato Anwar, for those inspiring points. There were many, many points, but I think that Anwar really covered the whole concept of yin and yang, and what are the 5 symbols. And he talked about the flower, he talked about the star, if you want to be a star, and the 5 C's. He talked about a movement, the power, the different kinds of power of success, the power of one, and so on and so forth, blessed unrest. And then he talked about the triangle and the different elements of generations, challenges, and systems. And last but not least, knowing what we are about and being firm about that, and yet being able to be flexible. And these are the key elements of what it is to build a people's movement. So we have some time now for chat, because we are Gabungan Darurat Iklim, for those of you here who may not know. And we are here to talk about how people's movements have created change in society, because this is what we are trying to bring about in Malaysia in terms of the climate emergency, getting Malaysians, getting our government to recognize that there's a climate emergency, bringing all the CSOs and interested individuals together to be able to bring about this social transformation. We cannot continue with business as usual, and we have to believe in the power of people. And so perhaps there was one question in the chat. I'll just go to that now. It's from, I think it's Damien, right? Okay. Damien, would you like to just verbalize it rather than me reading a question? Was it you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, Damien. Go ahead.
I'd like to see you. Are you a human being or are you a robot?
Yes,
Hello, Dato Seri.
very real person. Yeah. Maybe Damien, you can explain to Dato your organization as well. Just maybe with one sentence. Yeah.
Dato, I'm from Pertubuhan Pelindung Khazanah Alam. In short, we are called PEKA.
Yeah.
We're striving to protect all the forested areas in Malaysia.
Yes.
It's we're a bunch of volunteers. We don't get paid, and the good thing is, because we don't get paid and then we don't get donation from GLCs and the Malaysian government, we are very vocal when it comes to highlighting wrongdoings by these parties that I mentioned earlier. And my question is, how do we apply and cure the current divide between those who are wise versus the huge, more power wielding and influential idiots, as it seems that the divide is constitutionally protected and guaranteed in this country, Malaysia. We understand that that education from an early age is a way forward, but would it be too late to learn, change, and make it a way of life, as damages to Mother Earth is already critical now, and its follow-up effects in the form of global warming and climate change already has its right foot through the doors of our homes. What I mentioned, the context of home here is our country, community, and our daily life.
Yes. Thank you. I admire the work that Taka has been doing. I've been following it, and I see you appearing, in the different kinds of places and making a difference. And you use the word voluntarism. The real strength of social movements all over the world is that spirit of voluntarism. And there have been also two interesting books that have been written when I was at the university as a professor. There was a group there that did a book on voluntarism, and the whole culture, because people also don't understand. Very often, social work can also be institutionalized. So from movements of volunteers, it becomes so important that it becomes something that really so much has been done that you better employ some people also to help you to have an organization where they do it. So that persons start off by giving administrative support, but later then you even get more staff, then become like the executive directors and other things that actually manage the whole program. And there has to be money to be paid for them because the work is so enormous, and the volunteers become still like some of the birds that fly and give you wind under your wings and so on. But then you get some paid people who will do work. And then it becomes so big sometimes that, of course, government then begins to accept those things. And then they create a ministry of that problem. They have a whole department. And then there'll be people in the movement say, now there's already a ministry. Now we let them do their work. Our main job now is to make sure that they do their work. And so a whole different culture of monitoring those organizations we got. So one of the things that we have done, as we see this wave, because very often new movements start with voluntarism, the second stage where the volunteers who were the pioneers very often at the beginning have now taken different kinds of leadership roles. Some of them may even be employed by different kinds of institutions to give full time because they want to give full time. Some people who may be seniors give their full time, on their own without any payments whatsoever in that. So they become volunteers for life. Then they develop tools for shaming. So we had different kinds of monitoring system. For example, like when we had the world breastfeeding movement that we did. We take guidelines because the UN had adopted a certain amount of guidelines, and we write a little report card on the government, and we choose an appropriate day for the launch of that particular postcard, and we say, look, we have signed on to this, but we have only achieved this amount. And look at the other countries that have already achieved it, and that becomes in the public domain, and that shakes them up a little bit. And you may find them, hey, how come we don't, this, that. And there are some, of course, who won't care a damn and say, hey, that organization, find out a little bit more with them. Let's see how we can, give them a punch in the face. I mean, there are people who will have the tactics of fighting back. And you have to learn a great deal. And Gandhi was an amazing example of how he fought the system. And he had, you can imagine, all the greatest problems of the world, and different kinds of techniques then had to be developed. And he developed the satyagraha system of non-violence in the place. And that became a model of resisting authorities that don't want to make the changes that are really necessary. Very often, what we call them are structural problems. The politics of certain kind of structure, like we have in our own country, we are trapped in a certain kind of structure that's been made, more complicated by with the COVID issues and the way in which backdoor arrangements and all kinds of other things started happening. That we've lost confidence in agencies that are very core, like the persons who are supposed to fight corruption become the single most story of being challenged for corruption. I mean, you have this huge issues going up, and what Gandhi is, he inspired somebody, and that's a guy called Gene Sharp. Gene Sharp, and Gene Sharp, he just passed away a little bit. I had very great pleasure in working with him and meeting him. He did 3 volumes of a book of the politics of nonviolence, because when you are engaged in this kind of things, you have to learn how to also deal with what we have to call the politics, because it involves the policy changes at the highest level that go to parliament, so our structures of parliament. And he studied Gandhi, and he developed a 3-volume book on the politics of non-violence, how we legitimately use all kinds of tactics of doing it. And these in his book, 198, that's 99 times 2 tactics, So I just show you this, as an example. You can just Google Gene Sharp's name and politics of nonviolent. 198 non-violent methods of making change. So you actually find a menu of 198 things of different ways by which you can actually change. And if people are aware of different kinds of things, different kinds of groups also become specialized. Certain kinds of groups do this, certain kinds of groups do that, certain kinds of groups. So you have a proliferation of different kinds of voluntarism that take their own shape, work from their own area and do that, and then they form their own little communities. And then, because there are so many different groups that are working, there becomes a stage where you have to have some kind of a group together, of building up a community. And there are different kinds of methods, because sometimes you find such a diverse group, they don't want to work with you except only on that issue. That means they're not prepared to marry you, but they're prepared to have a love affair with you. So I use that concept, and one of the concepts in the social movements that we did, we created structures for cooperation that were called love affairs. So we started the World Breastfeeding Movement. Who are our founding members? The World Council of Churches. You say, what's the World Council of Churches doing there? On a breastfeeding issue. The International Center for Corporate Responsibility in UK, which is a branch of a church group that actually wants to make corporate changes in that area. Then we find a consumer organization is there. You find a local activist organization of doctors and nurses who are involved. So this strange group get together and start a campaign on protecting, promoting, and supporting breastfeeding in the world. And they work together to form a network called, and it's the first time in the world that civil society groups ever had used the word network, because the word network was not even talked about. And I'm talking of 1979. 1979. So I conceived of this word. I said, we want to have a family that's working together. People are divorced. Some of them, are diverse. Some of them, they will find it strange to form a legal organization that, has an entity, and then you have to have a board of directors and the funding accounts and so on. Here, no, we become a community, we become a network, and a network's a love affair where you work together on certain issues. You create a charter of the things that you want. In the breastfeeding movement, there were 10 things that we wanted, and those 10 things become like a charter for breastfeeding. All these groups gather together, form a network for that, and then you have conferences in discussing that particular charter, adopting the charter, and then allocating. If I want to get very good media work done, which is the organization that can do work? We want to work with spiritual groups. Okay, the World Council of Churches is a member of the World Parliament of Religions. The World Parliament of Religions have actually issued very good statements of environment, sometimes or other. So they have the huge network of themselves. In that area. So the International Medical Association of all the doctors of the world, they come on and they deal then with the doctors. So each of the groups deals with different parts of their own community. And then we said we need a very good newsletter. Who's got a very good newsletter? So one of the organizations that has got very good media outreach was a New Internationalist. And the New Internationalist was a very progressive development newspaper based in UK. So they come on board and said, we will help you, and we will have our issues with a special supplement in it. And their magazine goes to 20, 30,000 of activist organizations in the world who wanted to see a new world. So suddenly, what you do, you hitchhike. This is the concept of hitchhiking. This I say the concept of networking, hitchhiking. If there are people who are doing things and have got the mechanisms for doing that, write on that, work together with them and say, okay, do that. So suddenly we can have, within 3 months, we've got a newsletter that will go out to all the groups, and from there people are encouraged, share this with your friends, and you make it in such a way. The first newsletters were 4 pages, A4, say, go there, go to a photocopying machine and send it out. That time, unfortunately, no digital things were yet there. No digital things. And so
thank you, Anwar.
And there's just one more thing I wanted to add with that, because internet was not around, at just beginning. And the first internet connection I had was in 1983, 84, where we used a typewriter to send a message to another organization, and you had a telex machine, and then we had a computer, and then we began to send internet. I had one of the first internet operators from here, and we became, with the NGOs, with our communication system, faster than the corporations of the world. We were able to talk to each other, link with each other, because we had a network system. And when they want to have a talk with us, we'll say, we'll share it with the conference, and 5 of our organizations will appear at the meeting with them. So what happens is that we don't demean ourselves, we don't destroy ourselves by becoming so big that you have to only have one spokesperson, and then you become weakened. Here you build all the different networks of different kinds, then you have the strength of many, and then you take the many and say, 7 of us are coming to that meeting, and they're going to represent, because one comes on this issue from the church movement, one comes from the environment movement, one comes from the consumer movement, one comes from the professional movement, and all those people are there. And then they have to deal with us. They're dealing with us a certain strength of that is light, participatory, but very action oriented. And the same organizations, once they build the solidarity, then they have another issue, because you have already built this conviviality, and a way of working. Hey, we need some help. can you take this on? And people do take on, and then you you accelerate in different things. Okay.
Thank
Claire.
you. Thank you, Anwar. Yeah, because we have another 20 minutes and we have 2 more questions, and I've got one as well. So we need to make time for at least another 3 questions. Darren, you've had your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful talk, Dr. Anwar. So you mentioned the politics dimension earlier in your previous answer. And I have a question related to that, because I'm from Party Socialist Malaysia, and it's a political party, so we want to engage with politics. But one challenge that we've always been facing is that a lot of people who do want to make Malaysia a better place, they are very turned off by politics. They don't want to participate. And it's very difficult because there's a lot of idealism among this group of activists, and they see that, oh, the politicians are doing dirty things, so we don't want to be involved. And we find it challenging because when all these people refuse to participate in the political process, it turns out that only the dirty and corrupt people are involved in politics, right? Because nobody is there to challenge them. So yeah. So I think even within PSM, right, there are a lot of people within our party even who spend a lot of time criticizing government, criticizing MPs, but then are not willing to run for office, not willing to organize, not willing to campaign, not willing to convince people to vote a certain way, because they say politics is dirty. And at least for our part, right, we believe that this is an important piece of the puzzle, that we do need to challenge the political power of those who aren't behaving responsibly in power. But in some sense, that idealism is preventing us from finding good candidates, is preventing us from finding people who are willing to campaign and engage politically, because they say that it's dirty, so we don't want to take part. And it's been a continual struggle for PSM. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that, right? Because I mean, the people who say that aren't wrong, right? There are a lot of things that are wrong with Malaysian politics, right? But at least from my point of view, that unless these people step up, and participate in the process and challenge those in power, things won't get better. But I don't know how to make that argument.
Thank you for that question, Darren.
Yes. And I have a wonderful experience of these kinds of things, even in reverse, where governments make civil society groups political and say they have to be destroyed because they are political. It's very interesting when you have this phenomena. For example, when I started the global consumer movement, and we set up something called Consumer Interpol. When a company sells a product in their own country, they have one law. In the third world, they were dumping the thing without all the warnings and so on in the place. So we expose all the double standards that they were using. And that shocked the world, because when you find different companies are being told, my God, I mean, how can you do this? No labels on your what do you call it, spray, for that, and it contains some poisons which you don't use in your own country, but this is also under your name. I mean, amazing, horrible things were going on. So we use the shock and awe doctrine, that we expose real things, which no one can argue about because the facts are there. The facts are there, and the facts, and we became so influential, so successful, that the politics in the United States is also the politics of corporates, where the companies very often have a tremendous amount of influence, and they organize themselves such that they wrote up one of the first reports. They set up something called the Heritage Foundation, and the idea was then to work out and fight against civil society groups that are attacking us. So they decided to call the consumer movement consumerist movement, because they felt that it will rhyme with communist. So you call them the consumerists, the mindset, and then they are working with left-wing people, governments of the world, and trying to destroy the global capitalist system, global system of freedom of marketing and so on. You see how the language, the vocabulary is there. I mean, this is something that is not here. It's also even two ways. It's going on all over the world. In Malaysia itself, we have a complex complex issue, because one, there are structural problems. Yeah, that's one very structural problem, because our so-called democracy is, if you start rating rates of democracy and so on, will be on the lower end type of democracy. Yeah? Because we don't have a system where, for example, like in Germany, you have voting by representation, by total number of votes. Yeah, the total number of votes. Yeah? So that you don't get by your candidate first come first wins. You know, you take the total number of votes, and the total based on the total number of votes, apart from the ones who win, the supplementary votes get additional candidates that are put in there. So you have a democracy that represents the views on the ground. So if you take a party like yours, because the unlikelihood of you getting many seats, unless you were dealing one time, I mean, the tremendous stories of Sami Velu, yeah, and Dr. Jayakumar, yeah, and how a small group could change, and the story of how somebody could change. And it was a very interesting case study of why is it that happened in that area. Yeah. Then you have the whole social movements like Breastfeeding and so on come up. Then you had the great opportunity of a transformation, and then it went into the hands of the traditional politicians, and the whole thing collapsed, as we know. Yeah. So one important thing is that civil society has got to be strengthened all the time, and they have to be forceful, they have to speak out and so on, because they can make work of the Party Socialist also more visible. Then you have to have very clear things that you want to see happen, because if you focus on issues, not focus on your name, yeah, because your name has although been bastardized, you can say, yeah, because straight away those are communist types, in language, the vocabulary that is used to demonize it's very common. So your issue is often take up an issue and become a champion of the issue. And when you become a champion of the issue in an area, yeah, in that you develop a certain reputation. Yeah, and I can see some of those type of things happening where you actually focus on issues, and in the issues that you focus. At the moment, with the kind of politics we've had for the previous generations, what I call the middle and the older, yeah, there has been something that's entrapped, and people have just begun to accept. We have to make those structural changes, voting by representation, separation of powers between the different, judiciary, and there are many structural changes, and there are groups who are fighting for this. Some of them are connected well, some of them are not very connected. Breastfeeding was one of the great symbols of how transformational change could be made and actually happen. The politicians rode on it, and of course, then the politicians also abandoned, many of the things, which is sad, which is what gives politics a bad name, also, because then you have to have whole new groups that come in. And now that the voting age has been lowered, you actually have a whole new world in which you can start talking about issues. In the case of a socialist movement, you are already handicapped by your vocabulary of your name, because that vocabulary of the name has already been given and demonized in the minds of people, and then it gets associated with it. And then people say, but you calling somebody a communist, but then you're doing your biggest trade and all that is all with China. Isn't that a communist country? What's wrong? Then people say, oh, but it's very complicated, because their democratic system again has a design of its own. So we too have a design of our own, but our design sometimes is they're based on so-called constructed race. I'm not talking about race itself, because race itself has got genetic meanings and so on, but constructed race, all of which has to go, and there are people at the different levels that have to change. So you have some things that you can sell, but if you want to sell them, you have to actually develop issues on which you get people coming and sharing with you, voting for you, and saying that's a good idea. We love, the whole petition things that are developing, that grow. It's amazing now because all the petitions are educational. They send to people. Say, I never knew the issue. I'm happy to see on. So there are many kinds of things, but I think you are starting with a disadvantage, because there is a certain kind of culture that's already been done, and it's very hard to take that off of people's minds. A whole new generation The vocabulary doesn't even come in their name. Then they say social. What do you mean by socialist? Oh, why don't you look at the best nations in the world that are governed? Look at Sweden, look at Denmark, look at Finland, look at Holland, look at New Zealand. Yeah. So the models, they say, oh, those are so-called socialists, but very often they don't even use the word themselves now. Yeah. The world has changed a little bit in terms of the vocabulary. And then you had the green parties, where green movements also went into politics. Yeah. And then they even took the name. And then later, some of them quarreled with the environmental movements, because when it came to decisions, they had to take some kind of, compensation, system, and then it's not to the expectations of the movement. But that's important for movements. We never have to give up. We want the best. We want the best. If they change, they change. But you also have to know that they can only do so much. So what do you do now for getting the state? Do you now demean them and say you're rotten, you never fulfill them? Or do you now chat with them and say, okay, we know you couldn't do this now. How do we move to get the rest done? Yeah. You succeeded in getting already 10% of the seats, and under the proportional system, you get into government. Now maybe we'll introduce you to 20 seats. You'll do introduce it. And there have been now occasions where the Green parties have become very powerful. Balance. So I think there are lots of thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hope the question satisfies you, Darren. Yes.
And always feel free. We can always have a chat. Yeah.
Yeah. Two last questions. John, you had a question. Can you just articulate it? Keep it short, please. John Turner. No, it's not here.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I actually wrote it in the chat session, and thank you, Dato Anwar, for a great talk. It touched on many subjects, and it was far deeper than what I expected. Anyway, one thing I'd like to, you mentioned Sufism and principles in life, touched on them. I would like to ask a question. Why is it in today's society that respect, honesty, and truth rate so low in the dialogue and the action between individuals, be they rich, poor, everywhere? And we see this in virtually every walk of life, right across through the legal systems, through, unfortunately, I have to tread a little carefully because I am a guest in this country. And whilst I love it, I'm appalled. And I've been in the area since 1972. And I've married an Asian girl. We won't say much more. 46, 47 years of marriage. It teaches you to be a little bit humble and be careful with what you say occasionally. But anyway, those are my points, really. Yeah. Whether or not we can just compactualize it and say whether it's a product of the computer, of the networking, of this modern society, whether it's a lack of religion, but the respect and humility has disappeared virtually from society. And whilst you and I don't have much left in life, not much, we still have to worry about it for our grandchildren and where we've come in society.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. I will give you examples of how the past has been globally terrible. No? We have got good examples, we've got bad examples, and the bad examples of dishonesty, crime, violence also have come from countries very often that are also dominating the economy. So a whole culture of that kind seems to be okay. It's okay to bomb, it's okay to kill people, it's okay to do this, it's okay. And so all kinds of things like that become legitimized because people sort of accept them. They try to weaken the United Nations because where you have a forum where you can actually shame people. And if you look at all the resolutions in the General Assembly, they are very different from what is in the Security Council. The Security Council is where people have veto power, and you look at the people who use that veto power, they stop all good things from happening in the Security Council, which don't benefit. If you look at the General Assembly, the vast majority have voted something that is to be done for a better world. I give you one example also. because who gives the money for the UN? The money talks, because they're based there in the United States, and then you have the grants that have been given. You don't behave, Mr. Secretary General, we're going to make sure you get out. Yeah, and they've talked in those kinds of terms, and so it becomes very difficult unless you have a community that supports this and are also prepared to put money. One person, his name was Tobin, we call it the Tobin tax, from Holland, had come up with a fantastic idea. And that is, the United Nations should become an independent organization that has its own funding. And this funding then will give it the opportunity of not being subservient to the governments who are giving more money and use that as a threatening place, or use the fact that they are providing the venue for the office, for the UN. One time, the UN even wanted to move to another country, and they said we don't want to be dependent in a country which is engaged in war, of a kinds. I mean, it's just ridiculous for us to be there. So Tobin's tax was to tax any money that moves from one country to another country. 1% of it goes to the United Nations. So all trade in the world that goes on there this way, and the United Nations then has an independent source of money, an independent agency who works then on the wisdom of all the collective decisions of the world together that are debated and taken over. You can say, of course, one day the United Nations also can become corrupted, but again, where are the checks and balances? And if you take Malaysia, if we look at our scenarios, we have gone through good times and bad times. And we have had times when we really moved up, and we created a situation where we're going to make a big breakthrough. Everybody felt that we're going to be change and wonderful, everything. And those people let us down. And it also happens, that people had, the most amount of faith, but actually ended up with a situation where nothing was going to change. It went back to a whole destructive mode. But we have not to give up hope. And I think the new opportunity for making things better is to be clarity. There's always, when one institution is failing, another one may be asserting itself. For example, now on the corruption issue, with the corruption agency at this, suddenly the Senate, for the first time, is taking a very strong leadership role in terms of holding an inquiry and going there. So these are the kinds of checks and balances. The judiciary can come in and they can make revolutionary decisions, as they have done with children that are born of parents, and then if the parents are born of a Malaysian parent, remember they can be Malaysian citizens, but if they happen to be a foreigner, cannot, and even though the mother was this. I mean, all those kinds of ridiculous things. It's interesting how the court finally comes up and we see justice. And the way that we will see justice is if we have the conscience and if we have always streams of civil society groups who always keep on doing, share the best, say, why are we not doing it? Invite people who are from all over the world, who come from those countries which we would like to associate with, use that to show there are ways of doing it. We can improve our judiciary, we can improve our parliamentary system, we have to improve this. And I think the new age limit reduction gives a great opportunity for education of young people. And so now, how do we develop materials that young people will now look at? How do we get and reach them out? Now, there's going to be a great, interesting challenge. And of course, people have done these kinds of things before. So you have also the great opportunity. Your heroine, for example, is Greta up there, which shows you how young people can do it. Who are the people? You get a singer who becomes a great activist. That's transformational, usually. You get somebody who's from the royal family who moves in and gets in and fights the system. Those are transformational. So key figures very often emerge. You may find that retired politicians, who might have changed.
Okay. Thank you, Anwar.
Okay.
So the final burning question is for GDI. We are the Climate Emergency Coalition of Malaysia, and it's last 5 minutes maybe. Just your really great piece of advice you can actually give to this coalition in taking this forward, because even though, yes, the name is climate emergency, but it's all encompassing. It talks about systems change. It talks about systems transformation. It talks about stepping up. And, Dr. Anwar just gave us this really, the three most important things for us to remember, for us to guard against in actually making this movement really successful for our country, because this is not just for today's Malaysians, but tomorrow's Malaysians as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think the most important thing that is necessary is for you to have a very clear focus of the thing, to also have a very clear networking system with all the like-minded people of the world, and have dialogues with them on different kinds of ways, and and make the larger community also become part of it. So your circle, a bigger circle, and a bigger circle, and a global circle, and then be connected with all of that. And that will inspire you. The second most important thing is capacity building. Build on workshops and programs that can build a whole new generation of people who will be eager to do this work. Most social movements have failed because of the very important principle of the third generation, that sees the destruction. Because the first generation were the activists. They did amazing amount of work. The second generation, there were people who saw these good people doing work. They came in and they did it. But the third generation never bothered about anything because things seem to be quite nice and so on, and they become victims of everything else, So I would, every organization that I've been, 30% of the time of that organization was spent in creating new leaders. Yeah. So one of your projects, and if you do even nothing else, is train persons who themselves can become trainers, because there's one training, and you develop them. All the modules are available. I mean, different kinds of things that you want to share. I have got a book called the Change Makers Handbook. There a group like Commas does a very good communication training programs for young people on how to make change. They've done workshops like that. But if you set up one, because you've got your network of dioceses and so on, programs that can be done in different places with a module, and this is the climate change module, which is simple, gets them engaged, gives them, the things that they can do. If all of them receive, like I very often share, and I shared that I think with you, Claire, about 99 ways of making peace, culture of peace. Yeah. The United Nations, have got very simple, and there are lots of books also for young people on how to become a change maker. So focus your life and organization, because if you are thinking of a future, if you don't make that a priority, I'm sorry, you don't have a future. Yeah, you don't have a future. So capacity building, training, organize. Every year. I just came this morning from a workshop on urban farming. The Consumer Association of Penang has started a national movement for urban farming. Every month, without fail, they have got a workshop on how you learn about new kinds of urban farming that is soil friendly, that is organic, that healthy. And it's amazing the people who turned up there are people who never will have associated with the consumer movement at all. Now, suddenly they are coming there and they are learning something from basic because they've done this. And these people have become so supportive of the movement because they see something there. And they're training people then to become leaders in now food they understand the bigger picture, like food self-sufficiency. They learn about toxic elements in food. They learn about simple art of growing. They learn about simple arts of composting, all of which can be done in your home. Simple water harvesting systems and so on. There they go through that course, which may be 3 hours, but they go back transformed in learning skills into a whole new way into food self-sufficiency. So that's the kind of model. And I think if you want to go to the future, start building what I call multipliers and accelerators. Because the whole world's issues are known, but now how do you translate them? And just concentrate on the next generation and create the generations of the people who will be doing for the future. You will make the change. You will be successful, and we will all be grateful to you. Thank you.
And what is the one thing we should add against, one or two things, like things that can break a movement?
Breaks a movement. I think if you don't have conviviality, yeah, if you don't have that understanding and rapport with the rest of the world that wants to see a better world, if you don't also draw, like I said, from the blessed unrest in that, then you become trapped in your own thing, that only you do this. So neither are you connected with the universe, nor are you connected with the future. So if you take that mindset, that would be the worst thing that can happen to you. And I think for most movements that are passionate, these are the two things to recognize. You will go global and you will build the future.
Okay, so even though we are a Malaysian coalition, you are saying that we need to just build this global solidarity.
Sure. And there are spiritual groups all over the world that are also working on climate.
Yes, yes.
Learn from them. Learn from them. They may have designed a workshop, a wonderful workshop. You've got a whole module. Take the module here, start tomorrow. See, you don't have to invent anything. Somebody actually has done that before. And anything that you want to do, maybe 5 people have done it before already in the current movement. Join, get it, and then you go. Boom.
Thank you so much, Anwar. I think it's been a fantastic, really inspiring session today. I think I really love the questions. Any last burning comments from anyone before we close?
No, wonderful.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much, Dato Anwar, for sharing with us your expertise, and inspiring us and giving us so much to think about. We'll next talk. Okay. Posted, John. Yeah. This is recorded.
You can do so. Yeah.
Yes.
Not by phone, please. Not by phone, please.
Give your email. I'll give your email.
By email, then get it, because I received, even while I was in the last Zoom, 6 phone calls. People assume you're doing nothing but can answer a phone call. Huh?
All right. Thank you so much. So your email. Thank you so much, Dato Anwar. Thank you to each and every one of you, especially those who've asked questions and for staying with us to the very end. We hope you found this inspiring, and we really hope that this will trickle into all your organizations and into GDI, so that we can be a truly successful people's movement to create a better world for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, salams to all.